So what are we looking at here? This is a Gibson Les Paul Studio 2006 model. And so we can start by sort of deconstructing the name. As you may be able to see on the headstock, it is a Gibson guitar, which is one of the two probably biggest, most famous guitar makers, right next to Fender. And the Les Paul is a model that was launched in the 1950s in a licensing deal with the legendary guitar player and sort of jazz country musician Les Paul. He didn't actually have much to do with the design of the guitar itself, but it's sort of a name brand deal. And as for the name Studio, the whole point of a guitar like this is that it's supposed to be suitable for recording in the studio, seeing as how it doesn't look quite as fancy as the standard models. For instance, it lacks the white binding along the body and the neck, and some other bling factors like the knobs for tone and volume aren't quite as fancy on this guitar. So it's quite a bit cheaper than the standard models, but it's supposed to play and sound exactly the same. So let's go through some of the features of this guitar. As you can probably make out from here, it's quite a big, chunky guitar. It's made from one big, fat slab of mahogany, which is a very sturdy, stable wood. It tends not to produce very much feedback when you're playing it. And it's also made with about a 1/4 inch thick sort of top that's a little bit arched. Don't know if you can see it from here. Of maple. Now, why not just make the whole guitar out of mahogany? Well, because maple looks fancier. So you add maple, just the cap, because fancy looking maple is sort of expensive. You add the cap to make it look good, but you have the solid block of mahogany behind it. And the neck is also made of mahogany as well, while the fretboard or fingerboard, the part where the frets are and you put your fingers, is made of rosewood in this case. There are many different versions. There are guitars with the fretboards made of ash, maple. There are those covered in a layer of lacquer. There are those with no lacquer. All in all, this is a guitar that plays and sounds absolutely brilliantly to me. I consider the Gibson Les Paul to essentially be the epitome of elegant and just beautiful guitar design. As you can see, there are these two humbucking pickups, and I might make another video explaining the difference between humbucking and single coil pickups. And as you can see, it's what's called a hardtail. That is essentially a bridge that's just bolted onto the body. It doesn't have one of these tremolo arms, or actually it's a vibrato arm, but you get the idea. And you can also see that it has these mother of pearl inlays. Usually cheaper guitars tend to simply have dots, and they're looking quite fancy, as you can see. Of course, most guitar players, I do believe, tend to use them as guidances for what frets there are. So you know the first one is on the 3rd, then the 5th, and so forth. And there are also dots on the side, so if you're looking down onto the side of the neck. You can see from there and have a reference to which fret you're actually on. And now this has a selector switch, which switches between this one, which is sort of a bit sharper, harder pickup, and this one, which is usually called the rhythm pickup. It tends to pick up softer, more bass covered notes. And what else is there? And voila, here I am now again, because the mobile phone apparently ate my video, or at least the last minute or so of it. So I was going to explain about this little thing. It's just a tiny piece of white thingy. That's called the nut, and it's the bit that the strings pass over before turning towards the screws or the machine heads. So what's the problem? Why would this piece of shit be? Well, if your nut is shit, the strings will get caught. So if I, for instance, bend the strings like this, it'll get caught in the nut and won't flex back again, so it'll become out of tune, which is rubbish. So therefore you need a nut that's appropriately scored for the strings, and preferably one that's lubricated so the strings can move freely over the nut. I do not have that, so this guitar actually goes out of tune like a bitch. And actually, I do think that's going to be all for today. I'm going to go into some stuff in more detail in the future, but this was basically just a trial to begin with. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll come back for more.